Today, we're going to cover the full feature set associated with volunteer awards. So we'll start off with an overview of awards management, kind of the concept itself, alongside some theory about kind of their usefulness and different use cases. And then we'll dive into how to create all these different types of awards and when and where you might want to use those, how they're attributed to volunteers, both manually and automatically, how to search for volunteers who've earned certain awards, report on that information, and generally make good use of this part of the system. By the end of our time here today, you should be filled with some good ideas and set to go and create awards that your volunteers can start earning today. So the award management system at its heart is kind of a fun way for you to engage with your volunteers and give them different badges or goals that they can attain based on whatever metrics you're looking to kind of influence or have your volunteers engage with. So they're first and foremost something fun that can wind up on volunteer profiles. When a volunteer earns an award, when they log into their account, or if they use the sign-in console, they'll see a banner at the top of the page that tells them what award they've earned, gives them kind of the name and the description of that award. If they click on this, it will take them to sort of like a trophy case where they can see all of their previously earned awards and also how much progress they've made towards the next award in each category. So they can always go and review that information, and you can obviously have these pop up for volunteers when they're engaging with the platform. So, primarily they're a way to engage with your volunteers and create some drive or some motivation for your volunteers. We'll talk more about that in a little bit here. I think there's some ways to kind of boost how that's useful. But apart from that portion of kind of what awards are used for, they're also a very helpful tool when it comes to different types of searches. You can find volunteers based on like how many awards they have within a certain category, or when did they earn a certain award. So there are actually some really useful searches on your end that can be tied to these metrics, especially if you need to keep track of things like, has a volunteer participated X number of times this year? Did they participate in a specific set of events that perhaps garner a certain award? You can search by that kind of information pretty readily using your awards and find like when people received those awards, and you can print reports that contain that information. So there are some really useful tools on your end. But again, they're also just kind of a fun thing that you can engage your volunteers with. Now, before we get into kind of the idea of creating different awards and what those are used for, I want to talk about some kind of suggestions. Obviously, take this with a grain of salt. It's up to you how you use these awards, what they represent for you. But from my perspective, generally, I think that these are a good tool to be linked with something physicalized. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're creating things for your volunteers, or you're buying different things for volunteers when they reach certain metrics. Sometimes that is the case. You might want to give out like a hat or a badge or a pin or a shirt or something like that when a volunteer reaches some kind of milestone. But it could be something as simple as calling out a volunteer in a newsletter or putting their name up on a board. Maybe you have a cork board that has volunteers who've reached certain milestones. Something like that can help celebrate a volunteer reaching certain milestones alongside sort of this digital badge or digital pin aspect of it. The digital side of this motivates some volunteers, and for some volunteers that's totally sufficient. But I think tying it to something physical is a useful thing to do. And again, that could be something you're handing out, but it could also just be calling out the volunteer in a newsletter or drawing attention to them in some form or fashion that's not just purely online on their own, right? Kind of elevating the volunteer in the community based on, milestones they've reached, I think is a useful way to think about these and to bolster what they do for you. Now let's get into kind of the different types of awards you can create here, what they represent, what you might want to do with them, and how you build them out. Awards are pretty straightforward to create. Now I clicked into this kind of at the beginning here, but let's back up. When you first log into the system, you're on the main dashboard. Under Attribute Management at the bottom, you have Award Inventory Management. And if we go into this menu, from here, we can see all the awards we've created previously. So of course, we're looking at my demonstration console with a lot of different types of examples in here, and we're going to walk through some of these. If you've never created awards before, this might be blank. But up at the top, you have the option to create an award. So the way that you generate that is simply by filling out this information. We have the name of the award itself. We have a description section. One of these two things should tell the volunteer why they got the award. They're not going to see the award assignment. We're going to look at this more in a minute, but this is essentially how someone earns the award, what service does to give the award out. So they're not going to see the internal metric. They're going to see the name and the description and the badge. So if you want to use a fun name for an award, which I'd encourage you to do, I would want the description to tell someone why they got it. Right? You know, in my case, a lot of these examples, the name of the award is also kind of laid out in the description section. You don't have to do it that way. You could have a more fun award name and then just make sure the description tells the volunteer why they got that award or how they got that award. So that's the name and description, pretty straightforward. There are character limits in here, but they're pretty generous. The award name can be up to 50 characters. The description can be up to 250 characters. So there's quite a bit of room in here to give your volunteers some information about the award itself. Now below that, we have badge options. There are a lot of options in here. So you can either expand this section or scroll through it. But there are a lot of different icons in here, and feel free to obviously peruse through this and use whatever you'd like to, especially if you're doing like seasonal things. There's a lot of those types of options, but there's a lot of different options for a lot of different kind of scenarios. If you're looking through this list and you're thinking, ooh, these are nice, but what if we had this kind of icon or this sort of option? Please let us know. We tend to add these pretty regularly. In fact, I think our update this weekend is adding some award icons. If you'd like to suggest some different options for badge icons or award badges, you can do that through our customer support tool. If you click on Need Help at the bottom of the page, you can search for, support articles and things like that through here, but you can also click on Contact Us and then submit a ticket through here. Okay, so that's that badge. Below that is the assignment, and this is how you're telling Service, how does someone actually earn this award? So there's a couple different options in here. The first thing that I want to point out is you might have an award that you want to manually assign to volunteers. So for example, I want to give a volunteers a badge if I have seen them do something above and beyond, right? I'd like to give them sort of like a presidential service award kind of idea where I'm calling out the individual. It's not based on them having met some sort of number requirement. It's me seeing them going above and beyond. So on the right-hand side, there's an option that says manual in here. And you can use that to create an award that the system doesn't dole out automatically for individuals based on reaching some kind of metric. Instead, you can pick and choose who receives this award and when. Now, there are actually some use cases where we can automatically give out manually assigned awards. We'll talk about those more in a little bit. But I did want to mention you can always create an award that you choose to give to an individual. Otherwise, this assignment is asking how many times or how many hours or how many years. You can also see impact tracking metrics in here. So if you're utilizing impact tracking to record what your volunteers have done, how many miles they drove, how many meals they handed out, how many bags of trash they removed, that kind of stuff, you can also create awards based on that. But typically what you might do through here is, I want to give a volunteer an award for having completed 100 hours of service. Now this award also has a period associated with it. So when did they do these 100 hours? So on the right-hand side where it says manual, we can select monthly, yearly, or lifetime. So those are obviously periods in this case. If we choose monthly, they have to do all 100 hours within one singular calendar month, and they can actually re-earn this award every single calendar month. Yearly is another option. This is calendar year, so we are in 2026. So if we create this award right now, any volunteer who completes 100 hours within 2026 will automatically get this award. And then you can also choose lifetime. And this, of course, doesn't care when they did the hours, as long as they've been completed. You can do awards like that as well. So these are pretty common ones. If you do something like 100 lifetime hours or 1,000 lifetime hours, things like that, depending on kind of your volunteer base, you can set up awards using those types of periods. The lifetime awards, you probably already assumed this, can only be earned once, whereas those monthly and yearly awards, volunteers can continue to earn. So they could have multiple copies of these awards. There's another option in here that says of service. This is specifically associated with the number of years that someone has worked with you. And really what service does for this particular metric is it bases it on when their account was created. So in service, everyone has an account creation date or an account start date or a service start date. That language all alludes to when was this profile created, and it is something that you can update. So if you want to backlog and say, this person's been working with me since 1993, you could go and update that on their profile. And then the next time these awards are kind of processed, it would give that person awards based on, they've been working with us for 30 years. So you could create awards like that as well. Okay, so that's kind of these assignment options in here. Again, probably the most common ones are giving volunteers awards based on the number of hours they've served or the number of times. I do want to be clear with what this times represents. This is registrations. So if we say one time of monthly or one time lifetime, this is one participation. It doesn't matter how long that shift was. This person registered for a single shift or they recorded hours into a service project one time. You could think of this like a turnstile. In service, sometimes the language registration is used to communicate that information in some reports. But this is basically how many times have they come through the door. Okay, so again, you can do numbers of hours, numbers of times in a single month, in a single year as a kind of lifetime total, or you can create manually assigned awards. And then, of course, you can create those years of service awards. How long have they been working with you? When you're making an award, you typically want that award to be enabled. This means volunteers can see and receive the award. Again, first and foremost, that's kind of why we're making it, so volunteers can interact with this and receive the award. But there might be times where you want to create a hidden award. We'll talk about some examples of that in a moment here. That is an option if you want to have an award that is not visible to volunteers, but that you might use more on the back end for tracking some metrics. There's an option here to disable an award as well. If it's no longer something you want to engage with, this obviously would not be the first pick when you're making a new award. I'd rather just not make the award. But if you have an existing award in the system and you don't want to use it anymore, you can always disable it. Okay, so let's talk through some examples here. A lot of these are pretty straightforward. As we're looking at my demonstration console here, you can see these are grouped by the type of milestone that they are, or kind of like the period within which they can be received. So we have this years of service. Again, how many years has someone been working with me? Essentially, how old is their account? There is kind of another way to do this sort of idea using yearly participation. We'll talk about that when we get there. This is like how many calendar years someone has been working with us based on when their account was created. Below that, we have these lifetime participation milestones. These are pretty straightforward too, right? Someone has completed one time, so they've worked with us once. Someone has worked with us 100 times. They've completed 50 hours or 200 hours or 1,000 hours or 10,000 hours, right? So you can do different sort of ideas like that. Below that, we have these yearly participation. Again, these are based on calendar years, and these can be earned year over year. And there's something I want to stress about these yearly participation as well as the monthly participation. The system, if you make a new award here, it will automatically process for the period that we are in currently. These awards process daily. So when a volunteer reaches a new metric, it's going to give them that award as long as it's within, that period, right? So we have these yearly participation milestones. If someone in my system completes 40 hours today for this calendar year, then they would earn that award essentially tonight. So they would see that pop up in their profile when they log in tomorrow. So these awards get processed for the period that we're in. But let's say I just made this award, but I'd like to see who got this award last year. I can do that. What I would do is click on Process Award Assignment, and then I would pick a date inside the period that I'm looking for. So if I choose any date in 2025, it will rerun this award for that calendar year. So if I want to backlog these for previous years, I can go and process the award for different periods. Again, the date, the day and the month is kind of immaterial in this case because it's a yearly award. It just has to be within that calendar year that we're looking to process this for. And then what that will do is it will essentially, in this case, it would search for any person who completed 40 hours in 2025, and then it just gave them that award for that time frame. So you can do that with yearly and monthly participations. Obviously, moving forward, these just process automatically every day for the current period that we're in. But if you wanted to backlog some of that data, you can do that. Now, one thing I want to point out is you might have some kind of curriculum or status for your volunteers based on, have you done X number of shifts within this calendar year? And that denotes whether or not you're an active volunteer. That's pretty common fare, and you can use an award to track that type of data if you would like to. The benefit of doing this is that a volunteer can see like a badge on their profile, like, oh, I'm an active volunteer, right? So you can see my example here. Volunteer would be given this active volunteer status badge after completing 5 events within a calendar year, and that indicates that they're active for the next year, right? So what happens is once someone completes 5 activities this year, that kind of denotes to me that they're in good standing. I can search for people who have this award or do not have this award within a certain period. And I can use that to indicate, these people are active or not active, or maybe send someone a note to let them know, hey, you're not active yet. You haven't finished your 5 shifts. There are searches that can do this as well without having to create an award associated with it. The benefit of the award is that a volunteer can see this on their profile, right? If they reach that active volunteer status by having completed 5 shifts, then this would pop up on their profile and then they get a badge, right? You can always go into the advanced volunteer search and you can run a search based on participation. And I can just say, show me volunteers with between 0 and 5 times served, or I can say with more than 4 times served or less than 5 times served in this calendar year. And I can go and email to my heart's content and find those individuals and identify who's active or inactive and all that sort of stuff. But what the award does that's kind of nice is, first of all, it's automatic. When someone reaches that number, they get the award. And I can search by the award. I can find volunteers who have this award. And more specifically, I can search for volunteers who earned this award within a certain period. So I still get those same searchable metrics. But really the main driver here is, yes, it's automatic. And also it notifies the volunteer, right? You kind of met the bar for this year. Okay, the monthly participation milestones, very, very similar concept. These are given out on a monthly basis as opposed to an annual basis. Something else fun you can do with these, maybe you do a drawing for prizes. You can have someone entered into that using like one of these automated awards, right? So you can have someone earn a ticket, let's say once a month. If they participated in an event in a month, it gives them a ticket. And then maybe you do a drawing at the end of the year based on how many of these tickets people have, right? So you can actually search for people based on how many of these awards they might have in their profile. If we move over to the advanced volunteer search again, you can search for awards in the system. based on, just having or not having the award. Pretty straightforward. But let's go and find that raffle ticket here. So I have this monthly raffle. I can find volunteers that have more than 0 copies of this award, or specifically between a certain number of copies, or less than, or exactly. Because remember, everyone can earn this every single month. So if I do kind of a drawing at the end of the year, and I want to know how many people have between 0 and 12 copies of this award, or something like that, I can go and run a search like that in a given date range and identify the individuals who have multiple copies or more than 0 copies, so at least 1, or between a certain value, and I can use that as a basis for running a report, or using that to actually initiate some kind of draw. So you can run searches based on how many copies of an award someone might have as well, whether it's something that's earned in a particular period, monthly, annually, or manually assigned awards. We'll take a look at some examples of those in a minute. Okay, so those are those monthly awards. The next type, or the last type down here, it says other awards. These are all the manually assigned awards. Now again, these might be something like a gold star, where you are just identifying an individual who went above and beyond and you want to give someone that award. And you can do this directly through a volunteer's profile. So if we jump over to the volunteer database, I can search for an individual by name. Let's see, I saw them do something spectacular. I can go to Manage Awards, and I can select that Gold Star Award, select the date that I want to give it on based on like when that was or when I noticed it, and then I can add that to their profile. So you can manually assign awards like that at any time. These can be stacked up as well. Like someone could have multiple copies of this award as long as they're assigned on different dates. So there's that instance where I'm just identifying someone who went above and beyond. But these manually assigned awards can also be attached to certain things in the database. For example, I have an award here that's identifying volunteers who have completed kind of the process to become a driver, right? So I could have this badge pop up on their profile. And in my system, perhaps I use a checklist item for that. We could create a checklist item that says approved driver. I'd probably want more of a description in here, but then I can make it something that volunteers, once I give it to them, I can link the award for this driver. And then when someone receives that, or when rather I mark that this checklist item is completed on someone's profile, they'll receive this award at the same time. So again, it's not necessarily adding more functionality from your perspective. The checklist item is what you use to set restrictions, and it might be what you use to run searches, but it's indicating to the volunteer in a much more visual manner that they're an approved driver. They get a badge on their profile that indicates, this thing is true about them. So this is obviously an example of that. I have a couple other examples too, where you might want to identify like certified team leader. They've gone through all the training for that, or this dog walker example, or all sorts of things like that. So you can do awards that might be tied to some other metric. In particular, checklist items can automate that. It's identifying that they have done this training and they're an approved volunteer for this type of thing. These badges obviously show up in their profile. But the most recently earned badge for a volunteer also shows up when they're logging into their account. So when a volunteer is logging in, or when they're using the sign-in console, they will see their most recently earned badge kind of tied to their profile. And so sometimes that can be used as an indicator as well. Like if someone's using the sign-in console and you see that they have like the approved leader badge, that was the most recently earned one for them. You might be more specific when you're using awards in this manner, but you could create awards that you use to visually indicate things on someone's account so that when they sign in or when they log in or use the sign-in console, that badge pops up and you can kind of visually see that on their account. Okay, a couple other examples in here as far as kind of manually assigned awards. These can also be tied to particular shifts or particular events in your system. So you could create an award that's based on a specific event. Maybe you have events on certain holidays or happening at certain time frames that would indicate that a volunteer needs to earn a certain pin or badge. and you want to kind of motivate volunteers to specifically volunteer during certain time frames or during certain drives or pushes that you have for particular sets of events, every event that you create in your system can have an award associated with it. So if we go in and update, and when I say event, I mean opportunity. So service project, normal event, time slot event. If we go under advanced options, you can assign a linked award. And then if someone participates in this event, they will automatically receive this award after having completed or participating in that event. So again, you can use this. Again, it's not necessarily adding something that you can't otherwise search for, because you could search for who participated in this event, but it's giving your volunteer like a visual indicator, especially if you're talking about like seasonal things, then that can be a helpful thing if you want to try to let volunteers sort of collect all of those badges based on having participated in certain timeframes or during certain holidays or in certain types of activities, because you could give awards out based on that type of stuff as well. One other example in that realm, you might have a certain set of events that a volunteer can participate in, and that might indicate something else to you. So like I have this workshop volunteer shift. This gets added to someone's profile after they participate in an event where I have this linked, and then I can go and search for volunteers who have a certain number of those badges on their profile. So kind of like what we were looking at before, we could go into the advanced volunteer search. We can use awards, and we can say, show me all the volunteers with more than 3 copies of this award, right? Either within a certain time frame or in general, but we can use that as a search, and I can use that to update their profiles or send an email or run a report or do different things like that. So you can use like how many of those awards someone has to kind of view that information as well. All right, so like you can see this person has 5 copies of the award. We can see the dates that they earned it on, which would be based on the different participations. Okay, so one final thing kind of regarding what I just mentioned there, these dates and kind of viewing this information. You can run an awards report as well that will give you information about the awards that you select that were distributed or earned in a certain time frame. So we could select a particular award if we only want to look at that. We talked about like that raffle example before. That might be a useful way to do this. But you can run this report over a certain date range. This is important because it's based on when did the person earn the award. So we can say, show me all the awards earned since the start of the year. And then if we go down here, click run report, this is just going to give us volunteers who basically received those awards in that time frame. So we can see the name of the award, who it is, when they earned it. So we get all of that information kind of reflected in this one report. And then I do want to point out too, so like that workshop volunteer or the idea of like a raffle, someone's name would show up in this multiple times under that particular award if they earned it multiple times in that period. So like the raffle example, you could easily get a list of all of the individuals with people replicated based on how many times they earned that award. So then you could easily do like an actual raffle using that list. Okay, there's one final thing I want to mention as regards to kind of searching with awards, or something that I kind of mentioned before, which is kind of the idea of physicalizing awards, right? So if someone earns a particular award, let's say 100 lifetime hours, I want to call that person up, right? I want to put their name in a newsletter. I want to write their name on a corkboard, or I want to give them a pin or a badge or something. With the advanced volunteer search, you might have already kind of gleaned this, but if we go into the volunteer award options, you can say, show me volunteers who earned that award in this period, right? So I can go and say, all right, I want to find all the volunteers with 100 lifetime shifts. So they've done 100 different participations, more than 0 copies of this, so they have at least one. But you can apply a date range here, right? So let's say I did my awards banquet last November, and I want to see who has earned this award since that last time I called it out, or since the last time I gave out the award, then I could go in here and say, okay, we gave out the award on November 15th, and that is when I ran the search. So we're going to run through from the 16th through today, who earned this award in that time frame. So you can go and run that search and identify those volunteers, use that list to run a report, print out that information, email those people, kind of do whatever you want to, but you can identify who earned that award since the last time I recognized it, called it out in a newsletter, gave them a pin, badge, whatever it might be. That search is very, very useful for identifying volunteers based on, when was that award earned. And then there is one final thing that I wanted to mention that I kind of alluded to, but didn't actually show. And that would be when you are looking at an individual volunteer's profile, you can view and edit their start date. So there's the service start date, which would be when this person's profile was created or added to the system. This is also something that can be imported or updated kind of after the fact. So obviously you can see that date here, but we can also change it. So let's say this person did start working with us, years ago. I could go and change that date, and then it would update, when the next time awards are processed, it would give this person the correct, number of years of participation based on how old their account is. Okay, and there's one final component to awards and them being processed that I wanted to mention, and that would be that the system does process these awards daily. So if you make a bunch of new awards, your volunteers aren't going to immediately see them pop up. They'll see them pop up tomorrow, essentially, because those awards will be processed tonight, and then they'll see the new awards that they've earned popping up on their profile. And of course, you can then run searches based on that. If you want something to process immediately, especially these yearly participation, monthly participation, you can click on that process award assignment and choose a date to do that. But there's one other important aspect to this. If someone, let's say, reaches one of these milestones, 50 lifetime hours, they just completed their 50th hour today in a shift, the system does add a buffer to those awards of 2 days, basically just to make sure you have space to mark no-shows. So if someone completed their 50th hour today, they're not necessarily going to see that award today. They're going to see it in 2 days once the system kind of has time to settle, essentially, and verify like you didn't mark them as a no-show. Those hours weren't adjusted. They did actually reach 50 hours. Go ahead and give them that award. So there is a buffer for these metrics, not the years of service one, and not like if you're manually assigning something, but if there's an award that's given out for participating in a certain event, or if it's based on volunteers having completed a certain number of hours or time served, there is a buffer to be aware of. That 48-hour period, basically just to make sure that you can mark no-shows and adjust activity if you need to make any changes in there. Okay, well, that was kind of a deep dive into awards themselves and kind of the different ways to utilize those. There are obviously a lot of different options in terms of what you use awards to represent, and are we using them to run all of these different types of searches, or are we just using participation searches? Kind of depends on, do you want those visual indicators? And I think they are a really useful tool for engaging with volunteers and kind of allowing them to have just another component that's kind of motivating them. But I do recommend that in some form or fashion, you tie that award to something that the volunteers can physically engage with, whether it's, a newsletter, an email, or putting their name up somewhere, or actually giving them, some kind of award for having reached some kind of milestone that you are tracking. So there's a lot of different ways to use these. We brought up a couple different ideas today here as well, with like impact tracking and some reporting options. So as you have questions on those, I would encourage you to always use our customer support tool. They are excellent. Click on this need help button, type in a question or a topic through here. You'll see articles that have to do with that. But then you can also click contact us and submit a ticket through here. And then, of course, we do also have a lot of webinars on a lot of these subjects that we talked about as well. like impact tracking and different things like that. We have webinars on those sorts of subjects as well. So I want to thank you for your time here today. We'll leave this open just in case there's any more questions that come through. But we look forward to seeing you again in the next one.